BlizzPro's coverage of BlizzCon 2016 is brought to you by SteelSeries. We are esports. Alright, welcome back to BlizzPro's coverage of BlizzCon 2016. We are here with Allen Dilling, Assistant Art Director on StarCraft 2.
How's it going?
It's good, how are you?
Excellent, having a great show.
Yeah, most definitely. So StarCraft 2, kind of in a little bit of a, I guess, called maintenance mode, but still churning out a lot of content here. You guys announced the battle chest or war chest war chest, yeah. So what is that going to bring for people, especially for skins here coming forward?
Well, I think it's going to have a lot of engagement for players that want to keep grinding a multiplayer, and they get to earn these cool things. And the cool part about that too, for the war chest, is some of the money goes toward the WCS, which is awesome. So it kind of helps the community as well. But for some of the skins, we announced a few of them. We're actually working on those right as we speak back at work. For the Protoss, we're talking about having Tal'Darim skins, which is like Amon's evil forces. Like they're dark, they have bladed armor. For the Terrans, I think we're going to do mercenaries, which is kind of going back to the Wings of Liberty days. So it's like the more heavily armored, more advanced technology versions of all the units. And then for the Zerg, we're kind of going back to Xerus from Heart of the Swarm a little bit with one of the strains. Internally, we just called it like the A selection choice, but we'll come up with a cool name for it. But it's like more spikes, webbing between the spikes, harder carapace action, just overall the different color palettes. So.
Yeah, very cool. And what type of design decisions go into making sure that you want to create something that's new and cool, but still maintains the readability of the unit, so people will know, oh, that's still a Zealot or that's still a Zergling?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. I think often when you see games that have skins on them, they get a little crazy, and they our game, it's so important to have readability, I think, more than anything else I can think of. So we definitely, if anything, we're kind of going on the cautious side of that. And in fact, the first time we did it, we ran it through some people. Like we had a new stalker, and they're like, "I don't think you guys did enough," and because we were so scared about doing readability, so we cranked it up a couple notches. Because obviously on the art side, we want to make this awesome art, but I always tell my crew, "Hey, we're game developers first and foremost. We can't just be like, look at this amazing piece of artwork,' and then you put it in the game, and you can't recognize what it is." So, yeah, I think we're very conscious of that. In fact, we did a panel on this yesterday, and the first question out of the crowd was, "Hey, can you turn those things off? What about the readability?" And I'm like, we're going to make sure that the pro players and the casual players can both easily recognize things, so it only enhances gameplay by having kind of the geek factor, but it won't harm any gameplay.
With Heroes of the Storm coming out, I mean they're able to go, I guess, a little bit more wild than you guys are. But do you guys take any inspiration from that team as well, or just as sharing ideas of what would make a cool skin going forward?
Yeah, we talk with those guys quite a bit, and we get a lot of inspiration just because they're such amazing artists up there, and we see them every day. But I think we're going to stay a little more grounded with our skins. Like we're going to definitely not have the seasonal ones, or like the over the top, candy cane kind of stuff. I think we're going to be more like, this has to feel like it fits in the universe. So it's just another faction that you see normally in the campaign, for example. So nothing too outlandish.
And is that something that in the future, because you said that these the war chests will have like seasons that they can go and buy into, and you might have multiple during the year. Will you see stuff that we might maybe doesn't have assets that were built, from the previous campaigns in the game, and you might get a little bit more creative in how you develop those skins?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we definitely don't want to just rip everything out of the campaign, but for the first set, that was the easiest. We thought that fans would kind of like that too, because you've seen it before, but you never would have access to it, right? I think moving forward, beyond the factions, I think we'll start getting a little more creative, but still make sure that it sticks within the universe.
As far as like Protoss design, I just was curious, what was kind of the design considerations coming from even Brood War and kind of those original designs into what they are in StarCraft 2, where they're a bit more bulky and they're definitely look more physically strong than they did in the Brood War campaign.
Yeah, I didn't work on Brood War. I got here just after that, but I think when we first started making Wings of Liberty, it was really fun. We had to go through and look at the old art, and amazingly enough, we had very little source art from that original game. Like we had the concepts and we had the sprites, but we didn't have like the high poly models they used to make the sprites with. And some of the crew was the same, but even it had been so long they forgot like what exactly that thing was. Like, what's this little nub on the Scout? And somebody's like, oh, that's from before when it was like a speeder bike. And then we turned into a scout, and like, you know, and like, oh, okay, that's totally different. Or what's that little thing right here? Oh, that's a dude inside the turret. And like, there's a guy in there. So, you know, we had to reinterpret things quite a bit. So I think one of the deals was just coming off of Warcraft 3, learning 3D for the first time, trying to translate that into StarCraft 2. I think it wasn't a conscious decision to really bulk up the Protoss, but I think just the aesthetics we have with the armored plating on them, and I think just having more time to iterate and having some of the original crew that made the first game, letting them kind of iterate on their own designs from you know 10 years beforehand. I think that was just one of the things that came out of it was the Protoss. They bulked up a little bit. They were pumping iron a little bit.
It's funny that you go through and you mentioned like some of the stuff going back to Brood War and the design considerations that you learned, or going back and seeing that original art. Because over on the Diablo team, they're about to celebrate the 20th anniversary, and so they're putting Diablo 1 in Diablo 3, and they've done a lot of like really awesome graphics work to go and make it look grainier, and bringing back some like the more tinny audio and stuff like that. Is that anything that you might, you know, do with some future updates for StarCraft? Maybe bringing back some of those, you know, those lower poly count models or something, some like old fan favorites.
I think that's a great idea. I think that'd be awesome to hit up one day, but we have nothing to announce about that right now.
Let's see. With Zerg design, I mean, were you kind of expecting Abathur to be so popular with the fans coming out of Heart of the Storm? I mean, he was kind of just a huge fan favorite. Obviously, game put into Heroes of the Storm, and just that design is so cool. What went into the design of that?
Yeah, actually, Abathur was designed by Samwise Didier, who is our senior art director. I think his popularity is just, I mean, he's got really cool art for one thing, but I think when we have these evil characters that are they're very manipulative, like Alarak even, fans just seem to be drawn to those guys. So I think same thing, like they put Alarak in you know, the co-op mode. And I think that's anything like that where you have that roguish character that you kind of root for, even though they're a bad guy. I think that always draws the fans out.
For, you know, mentioning the co-op modes, what type of like considerations are made by the art team when you're going through and putting in the new co-op commanders to try and make them feel different from the other commanders, you know, on the same faction? I know we have like there are different abilities that they can go through and use, but are there any considerations made from the art side of it?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends commander to commander. We try and make, I think the designers kind of set the tone by making them very diverse. You want to make sure each one feels very unique. And so on the art side, we try and complement that. Like, for instance, if each one has like a big death beam from orbit, we try and make sure they feel different, even if they're on the same fact. Like, say there's two Protoss ones, we try and make sure the colors are different. You know, one looks more plasma, one looks more like, you know, magma or something. We're just trying to make them as distinct as possible, because we know that as a paid product, you want to make sure we're getting your money's worth out of it, and we're not just like copy pasting everything in there.
And is that something that we'll be seeing a lot with Stukov in order to go through and like what are some of the favorite like design elements that you might have gone through and put into Stukov is going to be coming out?
Oh, yeah, Stukov's got some crazy stuff. First, he can call down a battlecruiser that's infested, but basically it's so infested it looks like just a big living ship, and it doesn't even, he can hardly tell it's a battlecruiser, which is awesome. We also have I believe it right now it's called the Apocalypse, which is an Ultralisk with kind of merged with Thor armor on him. So it's kind of like an infested Thor mixed with an Ultralisk, which is pretty cool, crazy. It shoots out missiles out his back. And one of my favorites is all the buildings can actually uproot, and they walk kind of like a spine crawler. And they walk and then they root back. So they can't fly like a typical Terran stuff, but they can still move around. And it's very creepy to see this huge command center just walk across the landscape. So that's really cool. And also, actually, my favorite one is the bunker. So one of our artists a long time ago, Steve Provost, like 4 or 5 BlizzCons ago, showed off just kind of for fun this bunker that turned into like this infested, Zerg character. And so, hey, that's super cool. We couldn't use it in the campaign, but we kind of put it in the vault. And so the designer's like, hey, remember that thing we made like 6 years ago? And I'm like, I don't know if we still have that. So we looked it up, and it actually was functional. So they just they're putting it in right now, where your bunker will turn into that creature who can walk along and then re-bunker up, and then he actually produces infested Marines inside him. So it's pretty cool.
Well, that sounds awesome. I guess kind of along the same lines, I guess, is like picking your favorite child. What's your favorite piece of art that you've been able to work on at Blizzard?
Oh man, my favorite piece of art. The Void Ray is probably my favorite baby as far as that stuff goes. I love the Protoss. I'm a little more partial to them. So working on Legacy of the Void was a blast, because it's just like Protoss overload. But I think the Void Ray is probably my favorite one.
Awesome.
Do you guys have fun like with going back to the Stukov and how everything is infested and shows off like that? Is there anything like the art team that wants to do? It's like, oh, we want to do like this infested, or there's like a combination or like a mix up or match up that like the art team wants to do and works with the developers to try and make sure that gets represented in the game somehow.
Yeah, often it's design driven as far as like the roles and the abilities and the spells, but there's definitely a little back and forth. Like, for instance, way back in the day, the Thor just came to light just because design or art was like, we want a giant mech in the game. We don't know what it does. We don't know how it works, how to balance it. We're sorry, but like that's just so epic. We have to have that in the game. So
Doing it.
Yeah. So it took a while to get it to have a functional role and to have it all balanced. But we definitely have a good dialogue with design. We try not to push too much because we know like, hey, that's definitely their field. But there's some things that we're just like, oh, it'd be so cool if we had these big tentacles come out and they lash onto something and chuck the guy. And then like, okay, like how does that work actually? And we sit down with them and jam on it. So it's a little bit back and forth.
Awesome.
With Alarak obviously being another fan favorite, how did that design come around? I mean, obviously very dark compared to the I guess regular Protoss and much more sharp lines on the blades there. Just how was that iteration process on Alarak?
He was an interesting character because we had the Tal'Darim and Wings of Liberty just briefly, and we basically just colored them dark and like, hey, they're the same exact stuff. And so now we had time to dig into them deeper for Legacy of the Void. And again, Samwise made a really good concept for him, and we kind of figured out, we kind of reestablished what the aesthetic was, which is like, the dark armor, the red lines, like the blades are the biggest thing. Like it just should look violent and everything looks like you don't even want to touch it or look at it. It's just going to rip you apart.
BlizzPro's coverage of BlizzCon 2016 is brought to you by SteelSeries. We are esports.